Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's session, How to Take the Pain Out of User Access Reviews. My name's Emma. For those of you who don't know me, welcome to our monthly webinar series, and I'm delighted to be joined by Adil Khan, Safepass CEO, and Robert Enders, Bob, our VP Solutions Specialist. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started today. The session will be recorded for use, for reference after the session, and we will have time for Q&A at the end. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to pop those in the control panel, and we'll get to those at the end of the session. So Bob, if you'd like to go to the next slide, and I'll briefly talk through the agenda we're going to be following today. Bob?
It's showing the agenda.
Right, okay, so we'll be talking about opportunities and best practices, essential capabilities to look for, business drivers. We'll talk through a recent case study of how a Fortune 500 company has adopted Safepass across the enterprise, and then go into a quick demo if we have time and Q&A. So, Adil, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Emma and Bob, and everybody that joined today's session. I think it's a really important topic. Especially in the recent, months, we have seen an increase on focus on access governance. And while we've done a lot of educational webinars around policy-based access, so segregation of duties, etc., what we're seeing is a big need in the market right now is around access certification capabilities, right? And so that's sort of what I'm going to talk about today. If we can, my slides aren't moving, Bob. I don't know if you can move on to the next slide. After the agenda slide, yeah, there you go. So that's just sort of describes when we talk about access governance, what does that mean? And many times, folks think that access governance is about, user and passwords and making sure that, those are changed. That's great. That's really good housekeeping for security. But access governance is much broader than that. It's typically a company has policies around access governance that drive the controls and the security in the business, right? So you have to sort of step back and look at the enterprise level. And so what we're talking today about is not just the being able to define policies and control access based on those policies, but also specifically around how do you certify that access, and how do you make sure that the users that do have access, as they're changing jobs, coming and going into organizations, or within the organization, moving roles, how do you manage that, right? Because that's an area that's getting exploited for ransomware, for various types of cybersecurity threats that the market is facing today. And so we're going to talk about how to prevent that, how to mitigate that risk where possible. So it involves various aspects of access governance. Like I said, it's also user provisioning, fine-grained access. It's about privilege access management. It's about continuously monitoring the processes themselves, where many of the fraudulent or cyber threats are being captured today. And so that's the overall series of what access governance is. We're picking one more slice of that today, which is specifically around access certification. Next slide. So let's talk about, where is the opportunity? So I picked this out of a Gartner report, a recent Gartner study that is a couple of years old, but basically it talks about the access management market and what's happened because of these threats that I've talked about, cyber threats. What's happening in the market is the access management problem has changed, right? Initially, it was more about consolidating all your identities into a single manageable platform, so you could, manage thousands of different identities, user, non-user, service accounts, etc., from one place, one throat to choke, as they say. And then we realized that, even with that technology in place, which is now, a couple of decades old, the identity access management systems weren't really addressing the problem of you know, the cyber threats that has popped up in the market more aggressively in the recent years, right? So privileged access management is becoming a big part of that. IGA is becoming a big part of that. Uh, so we're going to focus on those aspects today. And the reason I wanted to share this data with you is because that gives you an idea of the opportunities. So what Gartner, in their analysis of the governance market, determined is that the market is shifting. The old technologies that were built in the couple of decades ago are no longer addressing the needs. And what's interesting to me on the right side of that graph is based on the responses that they got from their customers, that the technology environment has changed, right? We're all going to digital, we're all cloud, and so your requirements are different today than they were when you possibly first implemented, let's say, Active Directory or some of the older systems. And so 30% of the respondents said that they're replacing their incumbent system. And that's definitely an opportunity you have today. You can get, for example, a more modern system like Okta or Azure that has that capability. But even with those capabilities, and they're in the cloud, right? That's the other observation. Even with those capabilities, unless you have good policies that drive the controls, you're still access governance-wise, you're still lacking, right? So as you're making these decisions around changing or upgrading your systems, or you're just looking to maybe just keep the systems as they are, because you got other priorities like deal with customer service and supply chain issues. We'll talk a little bit about how we can also leverage what you have today, not necessarily have to go buy something new, but you can add on Safepass capabilities on your current IAM system, current ITSM system. And that's basically the piece that we want to get out to you, is that whether you want to upgrade to your new system or stay with what you have, we want to help you be able to govern your access better. So yeah, with that in mind, Bob, if you can switch over to the next slide, please. So this slide talks about what are the capabilities you should be looking for in access certification, right? So access certification is a process, like any other process in your access governance area or domain. So you want to have a really simple process because it touches every manager in the organization that has a reporting role, right? So any supervisor that has, one or more employees, staff members reporting to them will have to certify the access they've granted, approved in the past. And that's the central stepping stone on getting your access going. So yeah, you could do that today. Maybe you're doing that today in spreadsheets, you're using emails. So if you're a small company, you can send out, emails and say, hey, Bob has 3 employees. Bob, can you confirm that, these employees have access to Salesforce and Cloud ERP and these responsibilities and roles? And Bob gets an answer back, and the audit will use that to verify if there's a change and somebody has changed roles. You can do that. So you can start with anything. You're probably doing that today. That's why you're attending this webinar, because you're doing something. Or you may have something on the more extreme side. We work with enterprise customers, largest customer in the world that have very cumbersome process where they automate this, run scripts, generate reports out of those scripts, and then they send it out to different organizations around the world. We have customers that are in 100+ countries, and they're using some sort of a tool they bought many years ago. But what they've discovered using these tools is that they're based on abstract roles, right? So they don't actually go down to the entitlement level. And I'll give you an example of that, right? So if you have, let's say, finance manager as a role defined in your provisioning system, and that's what your managers are accustomed to seeing. So let's say Emma has finance manager as the role assigned to her, but she's no longer in finance, she's moved into marketing. So her manager receives the request, and they in that case they realize that, okay, Emma, so they just terminated. But other cases are more nuanced, right? So let's say that Emma is still in finance, but she's moved from accounts receivable to accounts payable. Now it's a little tricky because the finance manager doesn't tell you what privileges she has. So she may have the ability to create invoices uh, and pay invoices in the past through approval by her manager. Now she has the ability to change credit limits. And because she's in marketing and she has AR responsibilities, she might be able to change customer credit limits and issue orders that would exceed the customer limit, right? So these are the kinds of problems that our customers report at the enterprise side, where the privileges are scattered across many applications and roles are changing constantly. So you need some way of centralizing that control. And that's what consolidated controls management means, that second point that we have on the top, in the top of the slide. So we talk about having an intuitive capability, and then the ability to consolidate that into a single platform. So if you're doing one way of certifying in Salesforce, another way of certifying in Workday, another way of doing in SAP, it's hard for the executives to really rely on that data, because now you have to manually reconcile all these systems and users. And that's where the problem is at the top end of the market. So in the low end of the market, it's emails and spreadsheets. On the high end of the market, even if you're using tools that are doing catalog level approvals, it's hard to get to that. The third challenge that we help address, and the capabilities we help you address, is that the capability to do a closed loop access. So it's one thing to send out an email and get, hey, did you approve it or not, and get a response back, hopefully. But it's another to actually have a closed loop system. So if somebody says, hey, Emma doesn't need access to accounts payable anymore, well, what then, right? Did that get taken away from Emma, or does she still have that access? We call that remediation, risk remediation. It has to be timely, right? Because you're relying on the work that the staff is doing to report your financial results. So if that issue stays open, or it's open-ended and the year has gone by, I mean, now your financial statements are at risk, because now somebody is going to question that hey, if Emma had access to these items, did she in fact process something? Now you got to go do another investigation, what we call materialized risk analysis, look back analysis in the audit world. So now you got more burden on you, right? So to avoid that, you need closed loop remediation, where you can automatically remove the access when it's discovered through access certification. And I'm just surprised to find out how many customers are really struggling with that. So they're using tools, whether it's the spreadsheets or emails or even some IAM, IGA tools, traditional legacy tools that don't do that. So all that investment they've made is not producing the benefits that they were promised. And so that's an important problem for you to have to look at if you're out in the market looking for solutions. Definitely having the ability to remediate is a key part that's many times overlooked from our experience. And then does it ultimately on the top right, the fourth graphic there is does it really reduce the time, right? So ultimately, any investment today is for a return on investment basis, a business justification. How does that justify that, right? So having these global roles and entitlements consolidated into a platform like Safepass, as Bob will show later in the presentation, really helps you reduce that cost and the burden on your ITM system, on your IT's systems, right? Because now you can do self-service ticketing. So instead of that ticket being logged into something like ServiceNow, Jira, Remedy, that ticket will be automatically generated. It'll get processed. You'll get an update back that, hey, it's approved, and you will move on. So now you have a closed loop system, and you're synchronizing your IAM system, right? So you're making sure that IGA, IAM is synchronized, so that when let's say you're using SailPoint for provisioning, right? Or you're using, I don't know, Okta for provisioning. So when the provision requests are coming in, you can pick those up. So if there's new requests coming in, you can add them to your certification list automatically. So next time you do a quarterly recertification or review, you will have that already in place. So that integration is really important. If you're doing that manually, chances are errors will occur and you'll end up with a finding. One of the most common findings that we see these days is where audit is looking at what was in the provisioning system, in other words, what requests came in, what was certified in the certification system, if it's the same as the provisioning system or different, and what's actually in the systems where the user access was provisioned, so fulfilled, right? And if you don't have all that integrated, chances are some users, through exceptions, emergency access, whatever, got access to the entitlements and roles which are not part of the records, record keeping, and therefore you have an audit finding now. So that's a common request we're seeing as more and more customers have moved on to a multi sort of cloud environment, hybrid environment. We're seeing that as becoming a real pain and increasing the cost on IT to be able to remediate these kinds of issues offline in a manual way. So those are some essential capabilities that I wanted to highlight that you should look for as you think about ways to improve your certification process in response to this increased threat, the cyber threat, and other fraud risks that we're seeing in the market today. Next slide, please. So the next thing I'll talk about is now that we understand that there's pain points and there are needs that you can improve on, how to justify the cost. How do you actually go to business, people that pay for this stuff, and justify that? So some of the common things that we're seeing our customers ask for when they're asking for budget is improving that risk around the impact we're seeing on daily news from the cyber, right? So that's one of the justification on why you do something. There's also insider threats, right? Economies are in turmoil, various regions in the world, and we normally see fraud risk go up. There was a story about Yale University I read in the Times just a couple of months ago, where a long-term employee was essentially buying online, buying computers online and then driving down 100 miles and selling them on Amazon or eBay or something like that. And she had caused, I don't remember now, but tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of fraud. And that's a one control, really. And that is an insider threat, right? People that create suppliers should not be paying suppliers. So if I could create a supplier, change the bank account, or even put myself as a supplier and then pay myself in accounts payable, I can cause a lot of damage. So that's just a recent example that comes to my mind. Auditors are getting more vigilant, right? So auditors are improving their analytics capabilities. They're looking at deeper. In the old days, they would use the checklist approach and just ask some good questions and pull a sample out. Now they are coming in with audit tools, analytics like the one Safepass offers. In fact, some of the audit firms use Safepass. So they're coming in and doing that full 100%. They're not doing sampling anymore because of this heightened risk. So the cost and burden on you goes up if the auditor finds the issue before you find it, right? Because now you have visibility into it and it's not prevented and therefore is detected by the auditor. And now you have to revisit your process and the control design and rework a lot of that. So there's a lot of effort on your part there. So auditors are increasingly demanding of that, right? They're saying that please do your certifications. If you're not doing them in a way that we can rely on, we're going to come out and do a manual audit, and that's very costly for you. We already talked about a hybrid work model. So we need access everywhere. We can't work from one place anymore for various reasons, COVID being the most obvious one, but also just the way we're mobile. We're more mobile now. What we learned from COVID is that we should be able to work from anywhere, anytime that the company and the business requires, our customers require our attention. So this hybrid work creates a new opportunity and a new business driver for us because it has made us more agile and productive in many cases. But now we have the ability to access information anywhere, including our mobile devices. And so being able to have those privileges enrolled, certified more often, more frequently is more important. Next bullet point there talks about privileges that are granted and approved periodically. So not only are we seeing that users are moving, technology is moving too, right? So the privileges that are enabled within the application are changing. Vendors, ERP vendors are introducing new capabilities every month, every quarter. We're seeing in the cloud frequent updates, right? Especially our cloud customers are reporting a significant need for having a continuous review of the privileges that are being adopted to improve the digital transformation, but they also create a risk. And so that risk has to be mitigated. An example is, I have payables inquiry access, but suddenly we get a new patch or a new release in the cloud, and that now enables me to get access to a privilege that creates the supplier using that role. So those are the kinds of risks that we want to help you prevent. And then what it does is that you can save those hundreds of hours that you spend manually doing this work and automate that through the business. Last couple of bullet points around internal security. So you're following a security model. Let's say you have a IT GC control matrix, IT general controls matrix, and you want to be able to implement these new security standards. It's one thing to design them and document them. It's another to provide evidence to audit, right? So being able to do audit analytics around these standards to make sure that only the users that should have access to the company's most important asset, which is information, have the right access. And then ultimately eliminate a lot of the error-prone spreadsheets and so forth. So there are many we have listed here. They may not be all relevant to you, but pick and choose what's relevant to you and apply that to your business and create a justification to make a business case for this. Next slide. Yeah, to just try to reinforce why this is, with an exact customer example, why this is important business driver and how other customers are using it. I want to just share an example of a customer that I recently worked with. It's a customer that it has many applications, including Oracle e-business suite and cloud ERP as well. They use ServiceNow and SailPoint. They're in over 100 countries, including the countries where there's wars going on. That's in the paper every day. So there's significant risk around access to information and applications and data. And so they needed a more robust way of doing tight certification, a closed loop certification, those capabilities that I talked about. Those were the capabilities they're looking for. And it was fairly manual, right? So many of the steps, whether it was policy or the audit trail around certification, was manual, and that had escalated to a finding that required better protection around data management, fraud risk management, and so forth. So many business drivers, they came to us, and we do a lot of evaluations and POCs with our customers to make it easy for them to really see the outcomes before they ever make a decision to move forward with Safepass. So we did a extensive proof of concept around this area, and it ended up that they really liked the capabilities that Bob will show you in a minute about certification, and so yeah, so they're using full platform of Access Pass as well as Monitor Pass, which is something we're not touching on today's session, but there's plenty of material on our website if you want to read about it. So in terms of access certifications, what they're doing today is using Safepass for segregation of duties, for doing remediation, using that automated process I described as one of the key requirements. And they're doing it in a self-service kind of a way. So what that means is that the managers can go in and certify and issue termination when the certification requires that justification. They're also being able to use this capability down the line to do provisioning, right? So being able to do provisioning that has components of fine-grained, right? So in other words, we apply a policy to every request that comes in from a user to access. And then when the request has potential conflicts of a policy, so let's say somebody's requesting access to payments and suppliers, that'll generate a conflict and red flag, and their manager or the control owners and the business process owners can prevent that access. And then today what we'll talk about, I'll hand it over to Bob, is about how are they doing certifications, because certifications not only help with the cyber threats, but also reduces your segregation of duty risks, because what we find many times, the policies that are being violated is by accounts that are no longer active, they're dormant accounts, and this never have been terminated because of various changes in the business or technology. So that's kind of a quick case study on a client that I recently worked with. I think there's one more slide, or this next to you, Bob?
This is the transition slide.
Yeah, why don't you pick up here and kind of walk us through what we did? Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Adil. For the end of the presentation, we'll introduce you to our Enterprise Access Certification Access Manager, and we'll do a little bit of a demonstration. But I think it's important to review this particular slide is how we've got a converged IAM platform that came out of the case study that Adil just described. And I just want to kind of step you through the different tasks and processes. If I go to point number one here, integration. Essentially, we pull ERP data out of the application, bring it into Safepass, and in Safepass, we perform certain analytics or certain capabilities relative to managing access. So segregation of duties is one, user provision is another. Core to today's presentation is access certification. So we bring that data in. We go to step number two, and the real strength and beauty of what Safepass provides with their enterprise access certification solution is unlimited data sources. Not only we do it within the ERP itself, but also your database, your operating system, your network, basically any data source that you want to do certification against. So we can bring that data into Safepass to provide that analysis that you want with respect to certification. Go to step bullet number three, the access review and certification. Periodically you want to review individuals' access. You assign your process owners, you assign certain roles and responsibilities to that process owner, and then that process owner can go and view what individuals have access to his part of the business. He can make a determination whether to allow it or request that that be terminated. Step number four, Safepass provides full access by your audit organization, so they can review the results that are in Safepass. Adil had mentioned closed loop remediation. All that information is being tracked in Safepass and also in the ticketing applications. Go to step five. We've also provided integration to ticketing solutions such as ServiceNow. So if you generate a access certification, the control owner or process owner wants to have someone terminated, through Safepass, we can automatically create that ticket into your ticketing application, so that way it's something that occurs within your ERP, but it's got to be manually executed. So you have an audit trail of the actual ticket itself and when that ticket's completed. So when that ticket's completed, it feeds back to Safepass, so that all that information resides in Safepass. It was initiated by Safepass, but also when it's been completed by the person outside of Safepass. Step number six, which I just described, the ticket number and then the status of that ticket number. So that way, when it's completed, the individuals that have access to Safepass can validate that it's been completed. The next one is point seven, is integration with IAM applications such as SailPoint. So you can use request a provisioning from Safepass into the SailPoint solution, and then from there the SailPoint solution would do the necessary steps to integrate that user that's being requested after Safepass does an analysis of the rules, and that's been completed and can update the ERP directly. So I just wanted to let you provide an overview of this particular slide. little bit busy, but I think it's really important to understand our Safepass solution as it currently stands when it comes to identity management. This is the process that we provide within Safepass to do the enterprise access certification. I go through the various swim lanes, look at swim lane 1. You have to identify your applications, your roles and users. And those are set up within Safepass. So you identify what roles and users are assigned to a specific process owner, roles and responsibilities, and that would be the baseline for the actual certification process. We bring data in from your ERP to what we call snapshots, and then we bring in the application security models, so the individuals that have access to your ERP, they have a complete understanding as to what they're going to be providing access to. I go to the reviewers and approvers. They're assigned to different parts of the applications because you can set it up where you may have super user status. So you may have somebody in the IT department that want to make sure that individuals that have that access are being monitored correctly. And then once you initiate those assignments, you run the analysis, and then from there, the business process owners are being notified of through email as to and a hyperlink as to what users have access to different parts of the application that they're responsible for. And they can go in and make a determination to justify or terminate that access. As you go through that process, you can upload that data into Safepass, which is being done automatically, and until the actual certification process is actually closed. Once it's closed, you can't update any longer. We have some unique capabilities that kind of help enforce the complete review of different access. Once that access is updated, then you can run it in the Safepass. Depending on whether it's justified or terminated, Safepass will kick out a service ticket to remediate that particular access. This slide, I just want to point out one thing. It's in the title of the slide, is cross-link data sources. So when I say cross-link, I can have different applications, or I should say different data sources and users analyzed between those different data sources. So if I have somebody that has access to an ERP, also I want to see who else has access to the database. So I can create a cross-link relationship between those two different data sources and generate a certification or request based on those data sources. So it'll identify individuals that have access to both, and then the business process owner can make a determination if they want to allow or terminate that access. When it comes to workflow, you can define workflow based on attributes or groups. So instead of assigning an individual, you can assign it through a group. In this particular example, business unit is the attribute that's being used, and individuals that are in the hierarchy within the business group. In this example, Australia will be the individuals that are assigned to the process owner review and review of different access. And then also, if there's others that such as user assigned, you can also do that. So once again, the workflow is very flexible and configurable, and you don't have to necessarily assign a specific individual. It's done automatically based upon the application, how it's configured. This particular slide is also, once again, represents the cross data source mapping. You can identify two different data sources. Here we've got an example of Tririga and also SailPoint. And then we create that relationship, and then when the individuals, or when the certification process is initiated, it'll identify the individuals in those different data sources and bring it to the process owners for them to review. The notification process, which you'll see in the actual demonstration, is an email. That email is sent out to the different process owners, and from there they go and they can use a hyperlink and drill down into a Safepass or into the actual certification review, and then make a determination within for each individual to have that level of access. And then once again, as they continue to update the application and update Safepass directly, all the reports are kept current. And then depending on the date set to close the survey, it'll no longer allow you to update or automatically close it. As I mentioned previously, as Adil mentioned, there's seamless integration with all data sources, whether they're on-premise or in the cloud. We provided a technology to allow us to bring that data in the Safepass for that analysis and subsequent certification of different users across the organization. We also have, for your privileged access management requirements, the ability to track your super users and what they had touched with when they have access to the ERP. So that way, if you give those individuals that access and there's certain functions that they're performing, since they have super user access, in some cases called firefighter in our terminology, those privileged users will be tracked, and they're tracked, and what they had touched while they had that access will be tracked for and generated out of reports. And then we also have significant reporting capabilities, which we'll cover in the demonstration. Here we have just a simple graph that comes out of the application. User access certification by business group. But they're very configurable. Each user can configure the reports in a format that they prefer to view that data, whether it's graphical representation, typical rows and columns, and once again, you can configure it specific to your needs. So I'm going to jump into the actual demonstration. Log into one of our demo environments. First thing you'll see is an inbox. An inbox is workflow notifications within Safepass. Depending on the individual, they may have workflow notifications for, exclusions within an SOD analysis, incidents that are being generated through monitoring certain risks, also user provisioning requests. Once again, each individual have different workflow requests if they're involved in the approval process. On the drop down here, I'm going to go into our enterprise access certification drop down and click on access certification. We've already submitted these, so I'll be able to just kind of show you some of the capabilities. Managed certification process is pretty straightforward. You pick your environment. And then you can create that certification. So when I create the certification, you can identify, you can just decide the name, description, start date and end date, and one of the capabilities we had is also to end dated action. So if the survey has not been completed by specified end date, you can force the termination of the individuals that have not been reviewed and approved, or you can automatically verify them. Once again, it depends on how you want to use the application, how you want to perform. So I just click on create and it'll initiate. We have significant reporting capabilities. I'll show you those real quick, then I'm going to jump into my email. That hasn't completed yet. Also, access certification summary. Got the wrong environment. So now it'll generate the results of the certification. This one's the summary. I go back to the details, which I should have I grabbed the wrong environment to begin with. The same result. So once again, you can see all the details for who's been reviewed and where it's at in the process. So if I go into email, here's an email that we had run previously. And if I click on the hyperlink in the email, it'll take me into Safepass, but it'll also give me the list of individual users that that are responsible for my review. So I can terminate the access, verify the access. I know that you have a lot of individuals. It could be a little bit time consuming, but we provide some efficient capabilities to verify all. So if I want to verify this list, just review the list and verify, I can do that. I can terminate all. So if I know that all these individuals need to be terminated, I can perform those termination capabilities. I can submit and save. When I submit and save, it'll process it, and then it'll save it for future review. Or I can submit and close this survey. Once again, we provide the ability to eliminate the manual spreadsheets, automate the process, process multiple data sources in the same analysis, and it's all done within enterprise access certification, and provide the capabilities to improve the efficiencies of that process. Any questions? I've done as much for the demonstration. Any questions?
I think we have had a couple of questions come in, Bob. We've probably touched on this, but again, does Safepass work as a standalone solution or as an extension of your existing IGA?
It can do both. So if you want Safepass to standalone, you can limit the capabilities that you want to deploy, such as if you're only interested in segregation duties, you can just run that aspect within Safepass. If you're only interested in the enterprise certification, access certification process, you can do that also. And you can incorporate that into your, excuse me, into your IGA solutions.
Okay. Can you just go over again what makes Safepass different from other solutions on the market?
Yeah, I can take that one, Emma.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, the big thing that I've been saying throughout, and those customers that know us, we're policy-based access governance. Most of the systems that are out there today are not policy-based. So when you really think about governance, the thought that comes to my mind anyways is policies, right? How do you actually govern your access if you don't have policies, right? So I think that's where the market is struggling right now, is because the folks that came to the market 2 decades ago, they believed in this concept of role-based access controls. In other words, the roles will always, if we build our roles well and we put controls in the roles, then you can control access to identities, right? So for example, I mentioned finance manager. So finance manager is a perfectly developed role. When you assign that role to Emma, that role will serve the needs, and that was a fallacy. That was the problem with that model, because roles are constantly changing. Customers are driven with technology, organization, structural changes, globalization, internal process and improvements, supply chain, reorganizing work around hybrid models. So your roles are changing. So when the role changes, that whole model falls apart. So now you have this scattered concern that to enforce the policies, you're actually enforcing the policies manually. So I've seen, folks working late in the evenings, away from family and all that, trying to reconcile a certification because it's not role-based. It's role-based, rather. It's not policy-based. A policy-based system says that I have these policies. I don't care what technology changes, what roles change. I'm going to make sure that my company's policies are governed by a system. So if I have a policy, I don't want people to create suppliers and pay suppliers, whether I'm using Oracle e-business on-premise, Cloud ERP, SAP, NetSuite, or if I'm using ServiceNow or Jira, or if I'm using Okta or Active Directory, I want to make sure all my policies are already in place. We're the only system, as far as I know, that starts with the policy at the center of this. And we've been doing this for 15 years. So to us, this identity management came as an afterthought, frankly. We are a policy-based access governor, right? That's what our legacy is. That's what we've been doing for our customers for many years. What cyber risk has done for us is helped us extend our capabilities through APIs and data probes on our technologies into the rest of the enterprise outside of the main ERP system. So anything from the systems you just talked about, but all systems we haven't talked about, any kind of vertical applications, homegrown applications. So with our capabilities around, we have built our own ETL, so capabilities to do formats like protocols, rather like SOAP and JDBC and REST. You know, we support all those formats, and then we support all those protocols, and we support formats like JSON, XML, the traditional CSV format. So we can take data in from all your enterprise applications through these APIs and formats, and we can then help you build an enterprise-wide portal, a central framework for all your access that is policy-based. And policies is how you govern, anything really. So Safepass is built on policies. That's the key differentiator.
Okay, and last question, I think, unless we get any more. Does Safepass cover cloud infrastructure?
So OCI, as we call Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, is something that we use ourselves for our European operations. And so yes, we cover that because essentially the OCI capabilities are based on permissions and privileges that Oracle makes us available through APIs, which we can extract and do certifications. Same thing with AWS, same thing with Azure, all the major cloud vendors, Google, whatever cloud you're using essentially consists of privileges you're granting to users using APIs. And so since we can read those that information, we can include that in certification. In fact, I'm doing that right now with the case study that I mentioned earlier. We're actually doing infrastructure as well as database and server level for other on-premise application certifications, because that is a key part of identity risk management, right? Because that's where the privileges are to go and query things underneath the applications. So absolutely, that's a big part of what we do.
I think that's all the questions we have for now, but if anybody does have a question after the session, then feel free to contact either myself or Bob, and we'll happily answer those for you. So I'd just like to say a big thank you to everybody for joining us today. We hope we've been able to take away some key key points to take away for your own organizations. And if you do have any questions, queries, or would like a one-on-one session with myself and Bob, or even Adele, just reach out to us, and we'll be happy to assist you. So a big thank you to everybody for joining us today, and we'll see you hopefully again next month, where we'll be joined by EY to talk about risk management being an essential part of your cloud transformation projects. So thank you to everyone again, and have a great day. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.